The Shadow of T-34. How a Soviet tank shaped the fate of a German general. Hey everyone, hit that subscribe button and drop your comments below. Share your thoughts on the epic clash of tanks, the legacy of Guderian, and the legendary T-34. Your input means the world to us. So let's dive into history together and uncover its secrets. Picture this. It's the scorching summer of 1941. Europe is engulfed in the flames of World War II. Nazi Germany's war machine is tearing through nations like a hot knife through butter, with its generals, like Heinz Guderian, plotting a swift victory over the Soviet Union. They're riding high on their early successes, believing nothing can stop them. But then, out of nowhere, a new player enters the scene, a Soviet tank called the T-34. This isn't just any tank. It's a game changer, a steel beast that not only rattles the German army, but also leaves a permanent mark on one of its most famous commanders. How did this single tank become a nightmare for the Nazis and a turning point in the life of Heinz Guderian, the man known as the father of German tank warfare? In this deep dive, I'm going to take you on a thrilling journey through history. We'll explore how the T-34 became a legend, how it shook Guderian's world, and why it still sparks debates among historians today. I'll weave in my own thoughts, some economic insights, and real-world data to give you a fresh perspective on this epic tale. Buckle up for a massive, gripping story that stretches across battlefields, factories, and the mind of a military genius. Who was Heinz Guderian? Born on the 17th of June, 1988, in Kulm, Prussia, modern-day Poland, Heinz Guderian was a man with a mission. From a young age, he was fascinated by military strategy and the potential of machines to revolutionize warfare. Guderian wasn't just any soldier. He was a visionary who saw tanks not as mere support for infantry, but as the spearhead of a new kind of war, fast, mobile, and devastating. His ideas gave birth to the concept of blitzkrieg, or lightning war, which powered Germany's early victories in World War II. By 1941, Guderian was a rock star in the military world. He'd commanded tank divisions, led entire armies, and even rose to become chief of the general staff of the German army. His book, Achtung, Panther, laid out his radical ideas about tank warfare and became a blueprint for Germany's early successes. But every legend has a flaw, and for Guderian, it was his overconfidence and a tendency to dodge accountability when things went south. That flaw would come into sharp focus when he met the T-34. The T-34, a Soviet surprise. When Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, in June 1941, the Nazis were riding high. Their Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks were considered the pinnacle of engineering, and they'd steamrolled through Poland, France, and beyond. But then came the T-34, a Soviet tank that turned their world upside down. Designed in Kharkov by a team led by Mikhail Koshkin, the T-34 was a masterpiece of simplicity and power. Its sloped armor deflected enemy shells like nothing the Germans had seen before. Its 76mm gun could punch through most German tanks, and its diesel engine gave it speed and reliability. Best of all, it was built to be mass-produced, meaning the Soviets could churn them out by the thousands. In 1941, though, the Germans had no idea what they were up against. A dismissive report to Hitler. In August 1941, Guderian sent a report to Adolf Hitler, dismissing the T-34 as a crude example of backward Bolshevik technology. Sounds almost laughable now, doesn't it? Especially since Guderian would later sing the tank's praises. But back then, he was caught up in the Blitzkrieg's early triumphs. Poland fell in weeks, France in months. Surely the Soviet Union would be next, right? Wrong. By July and August of 1941, German tank crews in Ukraine and Belarus were running into the T-34, and it was a rude awakening. Their shells bounced off its sloped armor, while the T-34's gun ripped through their panzers. For the first time, Guderian's unstoppable war machine hit a wall, and that wall was painted red with a Soviet star. Why did Guderian underestimate the T-34? Guderian's dismissal of the T-34 wasn't just a personal misstep. It reflected a broader German mindset. The Nazis believed the Soviet Union was a giant with feet of clay, a nation of outdated tech and disorganized troops. They'd faced inferior tanks in Poland and France, so they assumed the Soviets would be more of the same. Big mistake. The T-34's design was a stroke of genius. Its sloped armor increased its effective thickness without adding weight, and its simplicity meant it could be built quickly and repaired easily. Guderian, focused on his lightning-fast offensives, didn't take the time to study this new threat. His overconfidence blinded him to the reality. Soviet engineers had outsmarted their German counterparts. The disaster at Tula. By the fall of 1941, Germany's Operation Typhoon aimed to capture Moscow and end the war in the east. Guderian, commanding the 2nd Panzer Army, was at the forefront of this push. But the T-34 was waiting. In battles around Tula and other key points, Soviet tank crews used their new machines to devastating effect, shredding German formations. In December 1941, after a failed push on Tula, Guderian was relieved of command. He blamed everyone and everything: Hitler's erratic orders, the brutal Russian winter, supply shortages. But in his post-war memoirs, one name kept popping up: T-34. It became his go-to excuse for why things went wrong. Convenient, right? Here's where it gets interesting. In Guderian's memoirs, the T-34 is like a ghost that only appears when he needs to explain a defeat. When things are going well, he barely mentioned Soviet tanks. But when the tide turned, suddenly the T-34 was this unstoppable force. It's almost like he used it as a crutch to avoid admitting his own mistakes: poor planning, inadequate intelligence, or failure to adapt. That said, the T-34 was a game changer. Its dominance forced Germany to rethink its entire approach to tank design. And that brings us to one of the most fascinating chapters in this story: the birth of the Panther. Inspired by the T-34, by 1943, it was clear that Germany's tanks were outclassed. The T-34's sloped armor and firepower set a new standard, and Guderian, back in a leadership role, pushed hard for a response. Enter the Panther, a tank heavily influenced by the T-34. With thick frontal armor, a powerful 75mm gun, and decent speed, the Panther was designed to take on the Soviet juggernaut. Guderian was one of the Panther's biggest cheerleaders, seeing it as the key to turning the war around. But there was a catch. The Panther was a complex beast, and Germany's war machine was starting to creak under pressure. The economic reality: why the Panther fell short. Let's talk numbers and economics, because this is where the story gets really juicy. By 1943, Germany's industry was in trouble. Allied bombings had crippled factories, and resources like steel and fuel were running low. According to historical records, Germany produced about 5,000 Panthers in 1943, while the Soviet Union pumped out over 15,000 T-34s. That's a 3-to-1 advantage, and it mattered. The T-34 was designed for mass production: simple, rugged, and easy to fix. The Panther? Not so much. It was a technological marvel, but it took longer to build and required more resources. Germany simply couldn't keep up with the Soviet Union's industrial output. By 1944, the Red Army was fielding tens of thousands of tanks, while Germany struggled to replace its losses. The T-34's economic edge was as much a weapon as its gun. Guderian's post-war reflections. After the war, Guderian penned his memoirs, Panzer Leader, where he tried to make sense of his defeats. His tune about the T-34 had changed. Gone was the backward Bolshevik talk. Now he called it one of the best tanks of the war. But even here, he couldn't quite bring himself to admit his own shortcomings. Instead, he pointed to the T-34, Hitler's meddling, and the Russian winter as the real culprits. Guderian passed away on the 14th of May, 1954, but his name lives on. He's often cited as an expert on the T-34, though his views were more about covering his own tracks than objective analysis. The T-34 wasn't just a tank. It was a symbol of Soviet grit and ingenuity. It kept rolling off assembly lines long after the war, serving in armies across the globe. Today, you can find T-34s in museums from Moscow to Washington, D.C., a testament to its enduring legacy. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, human ingenuity can create something extraordinary. This story isn't just about tanks and generals. It's about hubris, adaptability, and the power of innovation. Guderian's biggest mistake was underestimating his enemy, and it cost him dearly. The T-34 shows us that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. And on a broader level, it's a lesson in resilience, how a nation under siege can rise to the challenge and change history. For us today, it's a call to stay humble, keep learning, and never assume you've got it all figured out. Whether you're running a business, leading a team, or just navigating life, the T-34 reminds us that the underdog can come out on top with the right mix of grit and smarts. The T-34 wasn't just a machine. It was a challenge that forced Guderian to rethink his strategies in Germany to overhaul its tank program. It became a symbol of what's possible when determination meets innovation. Guderian's legacy is tied to this Soviet tank, whether he liked it or not, and their story is a gripping reminder of how one invention can reshape the world. So what do you think? Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments. Are you Team T-34 or fascinated by Guderian's story? Want more deep dives into World War II or other epic historical moments? Share your ideas, and let's keep exploring history together.